They were doing the computer stuff
Thank
first,
you.
right?
Chris, I don't have one either.
Call to order this budget workshop, second budget workshop, Rocky Hill Board of Education for the 2024, 2025, or wait, it's
23, 24.
2024, 2025 budget. Correct. If everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we're going to start, Dr. Zito. I had asked Dr. Zito to cover the pre-spending issue again, just to make sure that everybody understands exactly how that affects the budget that we're passing now. So, Dr. Zito, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So you all have a document in front of you that I prepared. It's just a summary. You also have a tab in your book under technology that illustrates that information as well. But basically, if you recall, when we came in last year for budgeting, Chris usually has between $500,000 to $700,000 in his technology and his equipment line item for 730. After I made some reductions, and then after the council appropriation, we ended up reducing that adopted budget all the way down to 35,000. So this year, we're recommending that it come up to 535,000, which is a typical level for that computer equipment. I mean, you think 35,000, you'd have trouble doing a lot to your own house as an individual homeowner with 35,000. There's only so much you can do. So, on a school district, that 500 to 600,000, 700,000, depending on the year, is typically where we like to come in. We're going back up to what I would consider a standard or normal level, but that is a $500,000 driver on the budget that typically wouldn't have happened, which is why the other night discussed clearly with the board that had we been able to keep the original recommended budget, we would be more like a 4 point instead of 5 point. That makes sense. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I really wanted you to see that stark number in front of you, it's in your binder as well. Last year's adopted budget for technology equipment ended up at 35.
Anybody have any,
I know
does anybody understand that?
there were some questions about that, and you want to make sure.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yep.
Cool.
I
Any
just have a
questions?
Quick question.
Sure.
What was the budget, technology budget in the past years?
It's usually ranges 500,000 to 700,000 in the equipment line item. You agree with that, Chris? In that ballpark? 500,000 to 700,000 normally.
So why was it reduced so
Because-
drastically?
Because we had surplus funding at the end of the 22-23 fiscal year, and this is what happens, and I know you're new to the board, Mr. Carver, but typically, when the Board of Ed adopts its budget, if there's a significant reduction when the council makes their final appropriation, the board will look at the current fiscal year that it's in at that time, and see if there's any leftover money at the end of the year, and use that to offset the impact of the reduction. So last year, we had a meeting last May of 2023. We went through a series of pre-spending exercises to try to minimize the impact of the council's reduced appropriation. Now, again, I'm being clear, the council did not cut the board's overall budget. It still went up 3.8%, but the board had requested 4.8%.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Zito. And then I think the next issue,
Yeah, I think we had a slide, I think Ms. Stevenson was gonna present some information, so, Christine, if you get that pulled up.
Oh, you want that one now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to stand up.
Yeah, I'll watch that one. Thank you.
All right, so I'll get started. When Amy's available, she'll join us. So Mr. Slattery had asked me to go over the information we discussed on January 8th at the Special Ed Committee meeting. And the other night, you saw an increase of over 200 students in the last 12 years. In the last 7 years, you could see that we've gone up from 307 to 427 students that are identified with special education needs that have to be met by the school district. We also have 198 students with 504s. 73 of those students out of the 427 are what we would term students that are in specialized programs. So they're receiving fairly high levels of support throughout the school day from a variety of staff members. So it's not just a special ed case manager, it's related services. So you think about occupational therapy, speech, physical therapy, social work services, school psychology services, and so forth. So those are high impact students. And we've just seen a significant increase. So as I've talked about frequently, while the overall number of students in the district has been pretty stable, around 2,500 students in the district, within that population of 2,500, we've seen a dramatic increase of students with significant needs. If you recall, I also talked about the multilingual kids, the EL kids who have come into the district, and we've seen a huge spike there, over 140% increase in those kids. Basically, it's created a lot of needs in the district, and we're really feeling it at the elementary level. So, again, back in 2017, very few specialized programs in the district. Now, at this point, we've got 9 specialized programs that deal with children that have behavior issues, children that have emotional concerns, children that really function best in a smaller setting, which for them would be considered their least restrictive environment. You'll also see that within this graph here, and I appreciate Ms. Stevenson pulling this information together, very few kids were in those programs. We now have over 70 kids. Again, the team's done a great job creating programming. We're also outplacing, on a percentage-wise basis, fewer students than we were previously. The Dream Academy is another really good example of a specialized program. Previously, those kids, we paid high tuitions to send them to area programs outside of Rocky Hill. Again, outplaced kids have 2017, 18 kids were outplaced. We've brought that number down to 10. So worked really hard to keep these kids in the district. But as we talked about the other night, the reason we wanted you to see this is that on the ground in the schools at the elementary level, the pace of the day, the intensity of the day is getting to the point where it's very difficult for one administrator to run a building with 400 children. You're dealing with parents that have concerns and need to meet with the principal. You're dealing with teachers that come, other staff members that have concerns. You're talking about evaluating every teacher in that building. There's a lot that just goes on throughout the day that is extremely intense. And I think Scott Nozick did a really nice job the other night. Most of you were at that meeting, kind of explaining that in past years, there may have been 3 or 4 kids in an elementary school that could take up a lot of the administrator's time. Well, now we're looking at 10, 12, 14 kids. I told you a quick story. I was covering Mosier School a few weeks ago. Literally was trying to come back to this office to get some documents and do a couple of quick things. I got not even a mile down, the Silas Dean and Marcia in the office called, gotta come back, we have a crisis. So, turn around, go right back, but without an assistant principal, that's what I had to do, go back and deal with that issue, and it needed to be dealt with. So I just want to impress upon you how critical it is. We looked at those other towns throughout the region. They all have elementary assistant principals. I showed you that slide. You have that slide in your packet from the other night. And what we're trying to do is accomplish this with a very minimal impact on the budget. So I talked about reconfiguring administrative positions. So currently, we have a math coordinator position that's a full-time 12-month administrator's job and a full-time 12-month special ed supervisor. So we have those 2 positions. So the proposal is to reconfigure those positions, essentially eliminate them in their existing form and reinstate 3 new positions. So we reconfigured the math coordinator into one of the positions supported in an elementary school. The second position gets reconfigured to the second school. And then I am requesting a third position at the elementary level, a .5 assistant principal, .5 special ed supervisor. That would require new funding. But the overall increase in administrators in the district, even though we're supporting all 3 schools, we go up by 1 new administrator. So I just want to be transparent. I know there were a lot of questions about that, and I just wanted to review this in kind of a different format and see if anybody has any questions about that information.
Thank you, Dr. Zito. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Zito on that? Mr. Kosker?
Is my mic on? All right. Thank you for this. I appreciate it. It's really helpful. And, you know, in addition to my questioning about it, I can imagine there's, you know, families and parents and, you know, community members that have similar questions about
Sure.
that. So I appreciate it. Regarding the math coordinator position, eliminating that. It's been around a while, I believe. I don't know the details because I've been
That
involved.
reinstated the year I came here, 12 years.
Right, okay, so it's been a
It was
while.
here, it was gone, it was back. I'm not happy about it. I'm not.
Well,
this is
so my
not
logical
something
question is just what happens with that work that that person's been doing for the last 12 years?
that,
You know,
I have to work with Dr. Listro. We have to look, you know, we'd have 1 administrator, Dr. Schaefer would be left working underneath Dr. Listro's supervision, maybe expanding her role a little bit, sitting down with the union, negotiating maybe a slight increase in salary and so forth to expand the role. But it's not something I'm happy about. So I'm not coming up here saying this is a great thing. I think it is a bit of a step back, but in my job, you're making compromises. And the need right now is very pressing at the elementary schools. And those principals are really asking for help. And that is a concern. And I talked to Paige Weaver about this. She's not thrilled that I'm recommending we reconfigure the position. And if you want to put it back in, I'm not going to argue with you.
no, yeah, I asked the
I can
question.
give you some ideas here
Yeah.
about the difficulty. The budget's already at 5.8, which I know is a high number. I've been in this job a long time in 2 different districts, 12 years here. That's a fairly high number. So in the role I'm in, you're always trying to make these calculations and balance and try to do what's right. But it's valuable work. Wouldn't have had that position all these years if it wasn't. And that will create a ripple effect. There'll be an impact at the high school because the math coordinator evaluates the high school math teachers. So more work's going to have to be picked up there by the administrators at that school. It will have an impact. It's not without impact. And again, I'm trying to, you know, a lot of this job is making compromises and trying to do comprehensively what's best and balance it against a reasonable budget number.
I appreciate it, thank you. Because again, just, it's a more of a curricular position.
It is,
Versus
yeah.
the kind of straight admin type position. So I'm just trying to get a handle on it and just understand it and make sure everyone kind of
Yeah.
understands the trade-off there. The special education supervisor, that's more of a kind of lateral sort of
more of a
move.
lateral move.
Right, it's not
What
a
I would
big
do is
change in role,
I
even
would
though.
assign that person to one school.
Right. So that
Replicate
makes,
that position at
is a
the
little
other
cleaner anyway, right? You're not losing much on that
Actually
when you.
gaining
Right.
a slight, you know, a 0.5, if you will, in special ed administration, which I think is warranted by the numbers.
Thank you.
Ms. Manila?
So Dr. Zito, I had a quick question. Around 5 years ago at West Hill, there was a lead teacher that assisted Mr. Nozick. And then the lead teacher ended up getting, she moved up to the middle school as vice principal.
Right.
That's when Ms. Adamo came in as
Yeah,
assistant.
a year or 2
around
after
that,
that,
yeah.
but around that timeline, yeah.
So is there any, there been any consideration about a lead teacher?
We do
in
have
this
lead
role?
teachers right now at all 3 elementary schools, but they are classroom teachers with a full assignment, with a classroom of 20 kids. So to constantly pull that person out, it's the best we do right now under the circumstances. If there's a situation, principal's out of the building, principal's sick, principal, whatever, child is sick, and the principal's home with his sick child, the lead teacher is still attempting to deal with his or her class while also getting pulled down to the office, dealing with a parent that might come in with significant concerns. It's a lot on the lead teacher. They're very valuable, but it's at the point where we think we just need an administrator, a second administrator in each building, from an efficiency standpoint, for liability, for everything, and it's a lot to put on that lead teacher for a fairly small stipend. It's a $5,000 stipend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zito. Any other questions? Board members? Seeing none? Thank you, Dr. Zito, for
Thank
that.
you.
Chris is next.
Bring it back down.
I do want to say, though, I had Dr. Zito go through that again because I think it's important for everyone to understand the work that's gone into kind of getting to where we're at right now. I know everyone sits at home and waits for these meetings, and they're all watching us at home, so they want to know. But I think it's important that people understand all the work that went into getting to the number that we're at. And although it seems high, I think it's important to understand 1% of that was pre-spending, and a lot of the maneuvers that have been made to keep it at a 5.8. So thank you, Dr. Zito, for that, and Ms. Stevenson for putting that together. Mr. Gay, it is your turn on. This will be the technology presentation.
Tell me now, bro. This is wild. There's like no staple. It just goes.
Okay. All right. So I first wanted to start off because there are questions on Tuesday about device protection plan. So this has been working for 2 school years now. I just wanted to show the work that it is doing. So just as a reminder, I came to the board almost 2 years ago now and asked that we start absorbing the cost of the insurance premiums we were forcing on the 4th grade through 12th grade students. It was $25 a year. We had about a 40% uptake in the actual insurance. We were constantly trying to get money back from kids, trying to work with the building administrators, trying to find a way to keep that afloat. And so I came to the board and asked for the board to fund it and put it into policy. So just this year alone, from July 1st, GMS is at 137 claims against the protection plan. There's only been 11 invoices that we've had to ask to be paid. High school has had 47 claims. There's only been 2 invoices that we've had to ask be claimed. So the only time we're giving out an invoice to the students is if it is intentional damage. So the kid decides they want to rip it apart, rip the keyboard apart, smash their screen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. I did give everyone a copy of the board policy that we added that describes that specifically, just so you know how we're handling it. But in my opinion, it has eased the tensions between my department and the buildings. The students, just grades 6 through 9, it has saved them $33,000 this year in premiums, another $7,500 in costs for damages, assuming they hadn't taken the insurance. So that's direct savings to the families. Just so you know, this year, 4th and 5th graders are not enrolled in the device protection plan. And that is because, for curricular purposes, we've moved all their Chromebooks to be more like the elementary school model, where they're in the classrooms in Chromebook carts. They don't go home. So the damage we see with them not leaving the classroom is significantly less. So we just handle Mosier's Chromebooks as we would the elementary schools, where we just replace them on the honor system, assuming that everything was an accident. So offsets for that is every Chromebook that we purchase comes with a 3-year accidental protection and warranty. Every device on those 3 years gets 1 accidental damage per year. So, technically, as long as I physically have the device and it isn't lost, we can send it in for repair. So that's a huge amount of the cost that's covered there. We've had kids literally have their Chromebook run over by a truck, sent it into Dell. Dell does a claim on it and sends a new one back to us. So that's a huge portion of the cost offset for that. We do purchase new Chromebooks for 6th graders and 9th graders every year. I'm kind of happy that we're moving to starting giving new Chromebooks to 6th graders, because that means the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders will have a Chromebook for the 3 years they're there that is on full coverage, because they are obviously the heaviest hitters that we have. They definitely eat them. So basically, and what our plan is, any devices that survive middle school, once those kids move up to the high school, we're going to use those devices as spares and to start refreshing the lower elementaries once we get everything squared away. And obviously, we're mongrelizing as many parts as we can at the middle school to make up the difference. So physically purchasing parts is coming out of the money that we get from invoices that goes in a student activity fund. I use that for all the chargers and stuff the kids lose and the parts. And then anything outside of that, we end up using the 430 line, which is my repairs budget. Is that good? Everyone's okay with that? Okay. All right, so we just have to toot our own horn here for a minute. We presented to the technology subcommittee beginning of December, and we talked about the transition at the high school with Dr. Listro and Ms. Galligan. The entire high school has been transitioned to the dock system with an iPad and a laptop. So that is complete at the high school. I thank the board for okaying the purchase of a new SAN system for our data center. With that, we're able to rebuild the entire data center cluster. We have a nice, fresh, very redundant system in there now that will hopefully be very good for us for at least the next 5 years. We managed to complete the primary AV refreshes. Every classroom at the elementary school level, or the primary school level, has a brand new smartboard in those classrooms. We were able to finish the wireless refresh at the high school and Stevens and the move to the cloud licensing. And we replaced the CTE labs with high-powered desktops for CAD.
Quick question. Can you just make sure you say what the, SAN and CTE, because I don't know what those are.
Sure.
Some of them, like AV, I know that one because that's old school. But some of the other ones, I'm not familiar with SAN. AV's for my day, but
Our SAN is basically the SAN that we replaced. It's a network attached storage, basically. So think of it as a very large, very resilient, very fast hard drive that we basically keep about 3/4 of the district alive on that one system. And that's why when I came to the board and said it's getting old, there's only one of them, there's no redundant systems. That was the conversation we had. So now we have they're two simpler ones, but they're in tandem. So if I lose any piece of hardware, I have another piece of hardware that will keep running. And like I said, that one machine houses about 3/4 of the district's information. CTE is the technology labs in the basement at the high school that do CAD and business and engineering and Project Lead the Way and all those programs.
those I know. Thank you.
So our goals for this year, we're going to continue that transition at the middle school to the laptop, dock, and iPad model that we worked on in the high school. The middle school's network infrastructure is due for upgrade, the physical switching, as well as both GMS and Moser's wireless access points have to be replaced this year. Those two items will be, and you'll see 50% reimbursement from E-rate from the state. A big thing we need to worry about is re-engaging the district in cybersecurity insurance. I have initiatives coming up that will talk about that. We need to start the high school AV refresh. The projectors of the high school are over 7 years old, starting to get very dim and need some, we need to start that process in order to keep the budget flat. Some laptop refresh is coming up just for life cycle. New HR and PD software, and hopefully a new homeschool engagement software we've been speaking about. Cybersecurity initiatives. This is all aimed at re-engaging the district in the cybersecurity insurance. First one I've implemented is Bullfish ID training. That is phishing, both phishing training and penetration testing for email phishing. Unitrends cold backups. Most insurance plans require you do what's called a 3-2-1 backup system. 3 forms of backup, 2 copies of everything, and 1 needs to be off-site, offline. So the only thing we don't currently have is an offline backup. I have a piece of equipment in place that was relatively inexpensive that we are working with the company to get running to cover that portion of it. Backup cloud encryption is going to be included in that project as just another of their requirements. A little bigger of an issue is multi-factor authentication for staff. We're actually behind a lot of other districts in that point. I've purchased the platform. We're beginning to work on it. It's going to be rolled out slowly, first to administrators and then to staff. Cortex XDR and our firewalls, that's our endpoint protection. So traditionally it would be antivirus. XDR is the step above that. It's basically prevention of anything being run on your system. And then network updates and compliance. So this was the budget I proposed to Dr. Zito last year before we came to the board. Based on what we needed, what I thought we could do, the direction we needed to go after the 5-year tech plan was written, which I gave new board members a copy of that. If previous board members want another copy, I have a few more if you need them. That is also posted on the website under technology. So what we actually ended up approving, like we spoke about, was half of that. So you see the majority of the cut is my equipment line 730. Now, like we were talking about, we had an approved budget of $491,000. Just the 730 equipment line, pre-spending out of that budget, or on top of that budget, was $441,868 for last year. So a total planned expenditure now for 23-24, including that pre-spend, is a little over $900,000. So comparing last year's proposed to this year's proposed, it's actually a little less. And just as that reference again, the planned expenditure for this year is $900,000. Excuse me. So we asked for history and expectation. So you see the last 2 years, the proposed budget before cuts, my equipment line was 335, 350. We were held steady. And then the 300,000 was taken out of the 750 towards pre-spend. So you'll see that all the other lines were also held steady, which is part of the account for why my repairs budget has gone up this year and software budget has gone up this year, because it's literally a 2-year compound of increase in our costs, the maintenance costs, the service costs for those. Power school's gone up, network maintenance has gone up, everything's gone up over the past 2 years. The projections are based on the technology plan and what we had talked about, trying to keep the budget as steady as possible and spread those things out over the course of 5 years. Obviously, I'm going to try to do that the best we can, barring any crazy increases in our services going forward. So this is the 730 lines broken out. In your binder, in the technology section, you have an even more granular version of that, showing classrooms and locations for a lot of these things. So the first two are the network upgrades we need to do, including licensing. Those numbers are after we took 50% E-rate reimbursement on those. 75 laptops due for refresh. Trying to stage those in. We have several of them that are 4 and 5 years old. We need to start replacing them, and also building in spares for the inevitable staff forgetting their devices, losing their devices, damaging their devices. We're down to bare minimum when it comes to spare laptops in the buildings. 131 Gen Ed iPads and SPED iPads. Those are simply devices that have aged out of Apple support. So they're literally no longer supported. Those are the ones we're replacing. 26 laser projectors for the high school and 10 for the middle school. All of those are at least 7 years old. Some of them are 9 years old, depending on the phase of the high school building project. Yearly Chromebooks, 6 and 9, and grade 2 is some of the oldest devices in the district right now. If you remember last year, we did the same thing. We actually did 4 and 9 because the Moser had not yet moved to the classrooms. So this would be the first year standardizing in grade 6 and 9. iPad Airs and pencils for the GMS transition, just like the high school last year, and docks for that. A standard security upgrade for cameras. A lot of our camera systems are aging at this point. Some of them are 8+ years old, especially our outdoor devices that take a beating. So I need to carry some money for camera systems. And then a single smart display that was missed last year at West Hill in their EL room. I did note no desktop computers will be refreshed this year. We're not purchasing any desktop computers. Anything that needs to be replaced or refreshed will be done so from stuff that we're pulling out of classrooms that are getting upgraded to docks and iPads. Just wanted to note account drivers. Our Extreme Networks maintenance increased quite a bit this year as a result of the whole industry is going to subscription licensing models that are just simply more expensive than their credit reports. So no matter what, I know several vendors, just because even though Extreme is by far the best for our district right now, everyone is moving to the subscription-based models because they can wrangle more money out of us. So unfortunately, that was a big driver. Warranties and renewals increasing significantly every year. That's what we were speaking on for the compounding. We are able to remove some of the maintenance on the old equipment that we're replacing, but the new equipment basically supersedes that. 590 software, we're adding all the iPads. You need a license for each iPad, so that's going up. Our new ticket system and facilities management system, we were forced to because the old one was aging itself out and they weren't developing anymore. Duo MFA. Google Workspace also changed their licensing scheme, which of course was more expensive. Yeah, Linkit Data Warehouse, that is a large, it's exactly what it sounds like, is a large database for student data to be designed and drilled down on so that we can pull information on a single student, information in classes of students, whole grade levels in the whole district. That's very near completion. I know Dr. Listro used it this morning, and it was very helpful for her projects. And then just general software industry increases. There were some small reductions, just software that we weren't utilizing to their fullest potential. Did want to touch on grant projects. Last year, we were successful in getting the PEGPISHA grant with Dr. Listro and Ms. Galligan. We're going to go again this year. We were able to get a presentation cart for the high school multi-purpose room, which was missing presentation gear. That was where we managed to start the iPad rollout because it wasn't in the budget for last year, with a couple of the small bits and pieces in there as well. We're hoping this year to finish those presentation carts because that one is taken off at the high school. The other buildings also have the same need. We want to refresh the auditorium projector at the high school because that is 8+ years old now. And we're looking at rebuilding our digital streaming platform. The board asked me for a wish list. As you know, we had a problem with our data center UPS this year that we're able to fix with some batteries temporarily. We are definitely going to have to look at bolstering or replacing that system in the very near future, as well as the power distribution blocks in that server room are starting to fail as well. I got some of them with half banks out, but those are expensive light items that we're going to have to talk about in the near future. I did push Mosier Data Center server out a year from where it was in the technology plan just because of cost, but we were going to have to start working on looking at that refresh because now we're coming up past 5 years. And then I'm looking at phone system conversions to what's called voice as a service. So right now we have on-prem servers and equipment that live in each building. Technology is very old. It's bulky. It's cumbersome to work with. The current way everyone's moving to is voice as a service, where you basically have a hosted system in the cloud, up in the ether, and basically what happens is you use your internet connection for your whole phone system. I have done one of those conversions before at a previous job. The systems themselves are very robust and simple to use. It would just be an uplift of purchasing handsets and starting a whole new system. There's nothing wrong with our system right now. It's just starting to age, so we're going to have to start discussing that. Okay. Does anyone have anything on any of that?
Any questions? Ms. Tucker?
I have one question, but I don't think it's directly your question. So you mentioned that there was a grant for the presentation cart.
Mm-hmm.
When we go over the grants listing, is there a listing somewhere of all the little grants that we get throughout the year? Because I'm just curious of how much we're receiving from little grants that are helping benefit our budget. So it's not a direct question to you, but an overall question.
PECPSHA grant works very differently. It's not through our state department the way we get our other grant money. You have to apply.
Mm-hmm.
It's a competitive grant, and you submit it a whole different way. It actually gets submitted through, and I'm going to look to Danielle, you did the submission for it. We submit it as a motion through the legislation. And you have a docket number, and your school district was assigned a motion. Last year, we were motion 54. And we create a budget, we explain rules, our calculation, what we'd like to do with that. And we received around $80,000 for the PECPSHA grant last year. That helped us to do the iPad initiative.
It's relevant. I can't hear what you're saying.
Can you come up and say that into the microphone? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's difficult to hear up here. No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so we apply for the PECPSHA each year. It's open to towns, so town municipalities, libraries, universities, and school districts. And it's through PURA, and it's called the PECPSHA grant. And so Dr. Listro and Mr. Gay and I, we worked together to make a list of, like a wish list, things that we're not able to purchase through the budget. And we write a little bit about how that will impact teaching and learning. And we have to submit a budget. We have to put exact, invoices and things that that we would be purchasing, so they can see exactly what we'd be purchasing. And they go through them, and we are usually notified 2 or 3 months later whether we've received it. Some years we might apply for $80,000 and receive $25,000. Last year we were very fortunate when we applied for the iPads at the high school and everything that we wanted to do. We applied for the $88,000 and we received $88,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Manil?
I have a question. For line item 730 within the equipment and projects,
Yes.
it's stated for the high school, 26 laser projectors. Are these smart boards? Or-
No. So they are interactive projectors. So we've been going back and forth between curriculum, and also I had I've started a technology committee at the high school to try and get opinions.
Missed that meeting, so yeah.
No, so this is just with, it was just with staff. It was just with the teachers. I was trying to get feedback. I was honestly trying to get them to yell at me and give me all the negative feedback on the systems we were doing so that we can move forward. And one of the conversations we were having was projectors. About half the building at the high school right now does have an older projector. So those 26 that I put in the budget for the year are the ones that are currently on an interactive projector. So basically, that is not a smart board. There's no board at all. It's just projected on the whiteboard. They are interactive, but not in the same way that a smart board is. So you have a pen, you can annotate on the screen. The software is not as strong. But the conversation we had is they have the iPads now. A lot of the annotation is going on the iPads. A lot of that annotation, a lot of the manipulation is all on the iPad in front of them. And the high school does not use the touch in the same way as elementary school classrooms. They don't have, entire slideshows of manipulatives having kids come in and move stuff around. So while we try and have those conversations, we got to try and start replacing, like I said, this is about half of them because they're all, again, 7, 8, and 9 years old, depending on which phase of the high school project. Next year's phase, to finish that, will require some more conversation with those teachers and curriculum to decide whether we're going to replace those smart boards, the smart displays that are in there, whether they're going to need to be smart displays based on their needs, or if we can go with a less expensive laser projector. And the reason the laser projectors is they're actually brighter, last longer, and there's no replaceable bulbs like the consumables that we have now.
Interesting. Okay. I wanted to make a comment also about the subscription. I work in this field also, and I have seen a huge spike in subscriptions, and they keep going up and up every year, so just,
I fight my vendors down as
Yeah,
much as I
yeah,
can. I got them
yeah.
to, there's a lot of, they don't know what they're doing. So to get where we were this year with the wireless, I had to badger them quite a bit to keep the numbers down, but I'm not gonna be able to do that going forward, so.
and on your wish list for the phone system conversion for VAS is, so currently, and I know this can't happen in the school system, but our division got rid of the phones. We just got rid of the phones, and we're using our Teams application. Is this similar to?
Yes, in the same, a lot of the systems that do voice as a service integrate with Teams, and you can use those numbers in Teams. I don't anticipate our staff or faculty being too keen on not being able to pick up their phone in the time of an emergency and that sort of thing. Could it be integrated in that way once we move to that? Most likely, yes. But I don't think that would or should be the primary use of the system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manila. Mr. Kosker?
Yeah, thank you for the questions, because those are great. And actually, I was thinking the same thing that Amber had on the grants, which might be a question for later. What other, like a list of competitive grants that we get? So I had a similar question
Yeah, it just gives us.
that maybe we can address later. Anyways, and I hadn't thought about the laser projectors. What's a rough cost per laser projector versus, I'm familiar with the smart boards, because that's what I'm
Sure.
familiar with. Just so you sense one's cheaper, but
It's about half.
really, and like what's the per cost? Roughly?
So I say installed
Ballpark.
right now, a smart display installed like we did at the elementary school is about $4,000 installed.
About 2,000 for the laser.
So it's about 1,700 for equipment and then
Okay.
installation, so it's about two.
Okay.
So it's literally half, which
Around
is
half,
why we're
okay.
trying to have those
Awesome.
discussions.
All right, cool. And that was, we're just follow-ups to these guys. But the other question was the iPads you said they're not supporting. The laptops is a 3-year kind of refresh. How old do the iPods get before they're not?
It's kind of dependent on how Apple decides to be that year. Apple's kind of finicky. So I try and make it
Of course.
5 years,
Yeah.
but I can
okay.
say the ones that we're replacing are more than 5 years old.
Okay, so 5+. Okay.
Yep.
Just getting a sense. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and unfortunately, we are kind of at Apple's mercy when it comes to a lot of that
I
stuff.
get all that. We're at everyone's mercy with this technology stuff, so I get that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kosker. Mr. Clemens?
Yes, with the, going back to the projectors, the laser, right, laser projectors. What's the life expectancy on these?
I believe quoted is 10,000 hours. So if we manage them and have them shut down, it's supposed to be 7 to 10 years.
Okay. And what you're asking for here, this will cover the entire high school or just?
Half.
Half high school. When do you expect to have to replace the other half?
Next year.
And then after that, let's say everything works out great when we do.
Then we have to move on to Mosier,
then
because they're going to be at 7 years plus at that point. So I'm trying to spread these out as much as we possibly can to keep the budget as flat as we can. But if we're going to try and keep on a regular schedule to try and replace AV, in the technology plan, I've basically laid out what we try to do for that. So a laptop's about 5 years, a desktop 5 to 7, just because of heat cycles. AV, we're trying to keep under 7. We had some, when I started 2 years ago, we had some smart boards that were 13 and 14 years old that were just completely failing and not doing their job.
And these are only at Mosier, GMS, and high school. We don't have these at Stevens and West Hill. correct?
Stevens and West Hill have the more expensive full smart displays, which is basically a 75-inch television with full touch capabilities and good software that backs it up so that they can literally annotate on anything and it just keeps going.
And we're gonna have to replace those, I'm assuming.
Those are all done. We just replaced those
they're
over the
all set.
last 2 years. Yep. So we're looking at another 5 years on those.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So in general, with technology, stuff has a limited lifespan. So what we're trying to do, and I think you explained it well, is spread out. Everything has to be replaced within a certain time frame, and we're trying to spread out when those replacements happen so that everything isn't being replaced at once. But nothing's forever.
And that way, if we
Especially
do have to
technology.
push something off a year, it's not already at 10 and 12 years old. It's
Correct.
only going to be 8 instead of 7. right?
Correct. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one last question on the phone upgrades.
Yes.
Is that similar to voice over IP?
Our current system is voice over IP. So there's a bunch of different modalities for that. Technically, our current system is what's called a hybrid voice over IP PBX system. The old system was PBX when it was all analog. We still have the old analog to digital devices that will hand off a regular phone line, say a fax machine, our intercom systems, that sort of thing. But all the phones are soft phones. They're sitting on desks plugged into the network. So technically our voice over IP. This would just move the management head of it into someone else's hosting space. Which is, again, it would be an uplift, but the recurring costs, we'd end up being able to cancel a lot of our phone lines, our PRI lines, all that stuff, because it would all be handled by the carrier.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Yu.
All right.
Right,
Some more light reading. Plan.
I think,
It's like the future.
Dr. Zito, next we'll move on to the object budget.
Oh, got a copy.
Is that what we,
Oh, aren't
I know we skipped it last night.
Chuck's gonna take us through
It's like the future plan.
Sounds good. Before we dive into that, I do want to make one comment that with regard to the special education stuff and the reason, I had only, I kind of cut myself off halfway through the point of why I wanted that all presented again today. Not only the work that was done to keep, it's not only important to know the work that was done to keep us at a 5.8, but also to understand that the changes that are being made are in response to real changes that are happening on the ground within the schools. And I think it's important to note that, and it's important for the public to understand that the special education numbers are growing exponentially, and these are issues that we have to deal with within the district, and they're responsive to those real issues that are happening on the ground. So that's the flip side of the budgetary constraints. Because it's not only, at least in my opinion, I think in most of the board's opinion from the committee meeting that we had, not only do we need that second administrator in the elementary schools to help with the children who are identified as special needs and have those additional needs, but also without them there, the one administrator is being pulled away from the students who do not have the special education needs. So I think it's very important that we address all of those issues in real time. So that was the second half of what I was saying. I got a little sidetracked, but I wanted to make sure I put that out there before we got too far into the object budget. So thank you again for all the work that has been done getting us to where we're at. All right, with that, Chuck, the stage is yours.
Okay, and just, because we already did cover the grant tab, and just to address the other grants that may come up from time to time. I don't see a whole lot when we do, and, we think that we can take advantage of it, we will. For instance, the state comes out with a security grant. We've had discussions on that. We did apply for that. We put a pretty substantial amount of money in that request. Unfortunately, the response that we got back, we got very, very little. I think it was $800 or something.
Thank you for your time.
They said that we got such a small amount is because compared to the other districts that applied, we're in pretty good shape. So I get that. Unfortunately, a lot. But we do apply. We go after the money. I guess another grant is similar but not so similar is the HVAC grant. Those types of things, if we have a project that's available, and typically HVAC wasn't available through the grant process because it was more considered maintenance. But we are seeing more and more of that. The state, obviously, we saw is making us go through that 5-year process. That's the reason we have that $130,000 in our HVAC operating budget this year. So when we do see grants available that we think, would be, the district could benefit by, we do apply for them. I typically don't, there's not a ton of them. But like I said, if we see something that is available that we think we could
I
benefit.
can't remember a time, we always come back to the board with that information anyway, so there's a recent grant would be the high dosage tutoring grant that Ms. Weaver and Ms. Dr. Leesboro applied for, we got that. I think it's in the
Right.
book.
Yeah,
The grant that Amy applied for with the Connecticut Council for Disabilities, that funded, that was about $83,000, I think, funding to start up
Let's
that,
go.
I think we're going to start with the object budget. That's where we left off. So, that's in two parts. The first one is the object summary report. And that report should look familiar to you, because that's pretty much what we send out on a monthly basis. So it's a summary of our objects. And just, and then behind that is the detail object budget. And that's what we use internally to really do a deeper dive into each line item, and that's how we develop the budget in more detail. And with that, so if you look to the left, just to explain it to you a little bit, you see the account number. Those first four digits are what we call our fund. 1,000 is our operating fund. We set up the grants separately. We set up the new cafe under a separate fund. We use separate funds for a couple other things that we do internally within the district, but from an operating budget standpoint, that's what that 1,000 is. The 02 is the program, and we'll get into that next. So, that may be art, English, all the different programs we have within the district, and we'll get to that shortly. But that designates what program it is. The third one is the object. That's a 3-digit code. And the object is really the service or commodity that's being purchased. And that designates what that is. Like the 111 is certified salaries. The fourth one is what they call the function. That's a 4-digit code. And the function is really, what describes the activity for which a service or commodity is acquired. So typically, it has some similarities to the object. Could be instruction, administration, various descriptors that go along with that function. And the last one is the location. Central office, the high school, GMS. And the reason I'm going through the account structure with you, so for any of those structures that we just talked about, the fund, program, object, function, or location, we can sort the data on one particular segment and look at it from a lot of different angles. Primarily, though, we use the object and the program. So I just wanted to I'm not going to get into a lot of the detail within the detailed object budget. I just wanted to give you a little bit background on the account and show you what we utilize a lot internally. It gives us a lot of information that we can do deeper dives on. We could attack it and do reference from a detailed purchase order report that backs up the cost or the encumbrance on a specific account. So you can take look at information a lot of different ways. And that's primarily, I just wanted to give you that background. These all, for instance, the one.
And so, just to be clear, these three things all account for the same,
It's all the same expenses.
it's all the same expenses, it's just broken down in different ways.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so for instance, if you,
I find that the object summary report is very helpful. That's the kind of, breaks it down, it's 2 pages. On the object summary, you can see what the actual expenses were for fiscal year 22-23, what the board's adopted number was for 23-24, what the proposal is for next year's budget, and where those numbers either go up or in some cases go down. We covered a lot of that in those global tabs the other
Yep.
night.
right,
But to me, and this is the one that Chuck passes out every month, this is probably the most useful form. The others, 31 pages is extremely granular information, but it is something the business office needs as they
right.
run their various reports.
Of course.
And expenses and look at developing budgets like this for future years.
Of course. So
So just to do a quick summary, if you look
Yeah.
on page 5 of the detail, you'll see a total of Object 111 certified staff. That number ties out to, on the object summary report, that first line item, salary certified staff. So that's all the detail that makes up that one line in the summary object.
Right.
So
So,
I just wanted to give you that information. We won't go through a lot of this detail because when you boil it down,
The object
we
summary.
covered all the significant changes by going to the global tab and then addressing in this budget where those changes are.
all right, so for the purposes of, why don't we start then with the object summary? Does anyone have any questions with regard to that? I mean, I think if we start there, and then we can kind of zero in if there are any issues on the more, I don't want to waste time going through stuff that people don't have any questions about, if that makes sense. Is there anything globally that people are? I'm going to go through them one at a time. Here, you have this. Does anyone have any questions on that, or do you want to go through each page?
Just trying to wrap my head around it a little bit.
Why don't we do this? Right now it's 7:30. Why don't we take a recess to use the restroom and to refill the water, and then we can reconvene. Does that sound good? With that, I'll entertain a motion to take a recess.
Motion for recess. 5 minutes?
Moved by Mr. Tucker, Mr. Kosker, 5-minute recess.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Clemens. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 8-0.
What's my new name? What'd you just call me?
Tasker.
Oscar. Okay, I got you.
From now on, you are forever
Oh, it's,
Tasker.
it's,
I have to go to the bathroom.
it's no, it's
So
good thing.
it's
Call this meeting back to order.
Want a cookie?
We were, Chuck had just started with the object budget. I think the best thing to do, I don't think we need to go through the 31 pages. I mean, I would defer to anybody here. Does anybody think we need to go through the 31 pages?
No, I think we can all do that on our own.
I think.
I can't say it
we've
with a
all had the
straight
book
face.
now for a week or so. I think that what we can do is, let's look at the object summary, all right? And if anybody has any issues, based on that, we can dive into whatever that issue is. We can look at it, address it, just so that we're not wasting time on stuff that nobody has an issue with. So with that, does anybody have any issues on page 1 of the object summary?
I don't have an issue, I just have a question.
Question, sorry, maybe issue's the wrong word.
No issues. Can we talk a little bit about the object 115, the substitutes?
Yep.
We're decreasing it quite a bit. Is that because we're seeing less need of substitutes this year?
I think what, let me see. I think, nope, can't say that. I think there were some minor changes, to be honest with you. I don't think it was anything drastic where we were intentionally reducing it.
Okay.
Trying to remember right off the top of my head
Wasn't it a building subs?
what it might have been.
Didn't we change the amount of building subs or something?
We got rid of there were building subs, I think,
Yeah,
that were
they're still-
COVID related.
Yeah, there's still building subs.
Increase it.
I think we
Didn't we
just
reduce the
reduced
number?
one of them slightly. There was a change.
Yeah.
There was
wasn't,
there was a change.
I'm remembering something with the building subs, like we had less now
Yeah.
after COVID.
Yeah, I think
But we
we,
increased the budget for
overall, I
23,
think we have the
24.
same number
Right.
of building stubs. I
It
think we
went
had
up and then
a
back down.
partial one.
Correct.
Okay,
So I think
That's
that's
fine.
what it was.
okay.
All right. Anyone else have another issue or another question?
Question, no issues, just questions.
Mr. I'll say Mr. Kosker.
Oscar, all right, that's good.
Kosker.
And again, some of this, I'm new, so maybe I'm off base, just correct me, you know. Overtime, I have no idea what's a lot and a little for a district in a place the size of Rocky Hill. I have no sense, but I'm just looking at it and 82,000, and, you know, it's this much increase, and so.
Yeah, the bulk of our
Just speak to that
overtime,
quick.
to be honest with you, is naturally, you know, it's for when we have snowstorms and, you know, we're trying to get the district in. But the bulk of it is really for the various programs that we run through Park and Rec, you know, after-school activities. If some teams want to come in on a weekend to practice,
Just
things of that
custodial
nature.
staff often,
Yeah.
maintenance and custodial staff.
We require a custodian to be on site if the building's open for safety and security purposes.
Right, right.
When I came here, that was not the case, but I feel very strongly that that's appropriate.
Like that.
Ron LaMontagne's done an excellent job locking down. We have control of all the keys now. The buildings are far more secure than they were. A lot of this was driven by the Sandy Hook situation. However, you know, the overtime is something that we manage closely. Typically, the requests will come, the CIAC has a 6-day rule out of 7. So it's athletics at the high school. Students can compete or have practice 6 days in a week. They're required to have a rest day. Typically, that's Sunday. But with the way the scheduling's gone, with the shortage of referees and umpires and so forth since COVID, basketball used to always, you could count on it, Tuesday and Friday night. Well, now sometimes we'll have a Monday basketball game. In those cases, the athletic director will contact me and say, the coach would really like to have a practice Sunday afternoon before the Monday night game. It typically, you know, wasn't an issue. Now, we're seeing some of this, so I will work with Ron to authorize opening the building for athletics, and that's where a lot of the overtime comes from, but we want the kids to be able to compete fairly against the other teams we're playing and try to support the coaches. So that is, something we take seriously, but I will not allow that building to open without a custodian to open it, be there on site during the usage, secure it, make sure it's empty, and lock it down before leaving.
And the arrangement we have with the town Park and Rec Department is if we have something going on from a school standpoint, practice for a certain team coming in, or if we have a school activity, a play or something like that going on the weekend where we need a custodian to come in, and they're in the building as well, we won't bill them because we have custodian staff on there for our event. But if we don't have anything going on and it's just covering, the custodians coming in for a Park and Rec activity, then we will bill the town for that, and they're willing to pay for the custodian time for that. And we offset that over time in this account based on, whatever we receive from the town.
Thank you.
But that is, just to clarify also, I take, that is just strictly for custodian overtime.
Thank you, Mr. Kosker. Any other questions? Ms. Morphia?
I don't know if this is the proper section to ask the question, because, but I know with the last board and every board before, we've always asked for the SROs. I don't think we had a safety meeting since this board came together, but is that something we're presenting again? Are we not doing that because we just got the new one?
Well, that's not part of the budget. The SROs are funded by the town.
Right, that's what I was saying. I think it was
That
this
was
section,
discussed,
but we never discussed it, so.
It was discussed in the fall at this, we did have a school safety committee at the beginning of the school year. We are now staffed with 3 school resource officers. Previously, we had 2 plus essentially a half a position that was funded through overtime on a rotating basis. We're very pleased with Officer Jordan, who joined the ranks with Officer Baker and Officer Raymond. So, that's a conversation I would recommend, if the board wants to revisit it, that we would get through the budget and set up a school safety committee meeting and have a conversation and invite the police department. From a personal standpoint, I've been very pleased with the performance of the 3 officers, and it's helped them increase their visibility. Ms. Stevenson stepped out because one of the SROs called her. That's why she had to step out early. Things happen. They communicate very well with us. It's not unusual for me to get calls at night, on the weekend, they're very active officers, so, but really, I think because it's not funded by the board,
Right.
I think the conversation would be more appropriate at a school safety committee.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Morphia. I will just point to the group insurance. Obviously, we talked about that already. That's kind of a placeholder at this point, right?
Right.
We don't really know what the numbers are. So that's kind of, if you could just reiterate that. at this
Yeah,
point.
and I just received a call today, matter of fact, from our broker on that, just to get an update as to where we are. So I think within probably 10 days or so, we'll have a better understanding on where we might be heading. We won't know at that point where we're going to end up yet.
Fair
But
enough.
we'll know where, I think, like I said, a better idea as to where we're heading. And then, we'll start to have some conversations if we knew, depending on the information I receive in 10 days. And we'll have follow-up discussions, and I would say by March, we should be in a pretty good place to know where we are.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other questions with
Just
respect?
one.
Sure, Mr. Clemens?
It's bottom of page 400, purchase property services, the increase of 73.13%. That's the HVAC?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Oh, that's the $130,000 statutory required. Yep. And that's once every 5 years, right?
Yes.
All right, so page 1, everybody good on page 1? for the object summary?
Yep, good.
Yes? All right, turning to page 2 of the object summary.
30 more pages, yeah.
I'll note first, what jumped out at me was the equipment line, which we've gone over. That's the pre-spend, predominantly the pre-spending, I believe. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's pre-spending from last year. I know that one jumps out because it's a 344% increase. So I just figured,
Remember, under 730, the equipment for technology in the current budget is $35,000.
correct.
We're bringing it back up to what.
Back up to where it would, where,
You saw in Chris's presentation where there's a real effort to level the spending and keep it consistent
correct.
at that level so that we don't have these wild fluctuations.
Yeah, so that 344% is kind of an anomaly because of the
Because of the
pre-spending.
pre-spending.
And it's just getting it back to a more level where it usually is.
You need, like, as you saw in his slides, you need between 1 million to 1.2 million a year in technology because these machines break down over time, they have to be replaced, they age out. And try to have a refreshment, recycling, if you will, is the best way I could probably describe it, where 20 to 25% of the inventory is refreshed on an annual basis in order to keep the whole system running properly. A lot of end users in the school district, staff and students.
Thank you, Dr. Zito. Any other questions on page 2? Everybody
Yeah,
take a
what-
second to look at it.
What about other supplies going up by 47%?
That's another one that I highlighted.
90,
Yep,
$60,000 increase.
right. So, supplies, if you remember, some of our discussions yesterday, we talked about, within that line item, we have 50,000, for the Dream Cafe.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of a placeholder or cushion
Right.
till we figure out exactly what the cost of the cafe is gonna be and supplies and stuff like that.
Right.
Right, because right now, there's no funding.
It's grant
Nothing
funded.
being grant funded.
Correct.
And I'm still trying to get grants, I'm still looking, and I'm applying for some, so if I get anything, then
Excellent.
we can take that away.
Excellent. And to Mr. Gavin's point, there may be an offset there as far as once we start selling stuff, although.
Yeah, eventually. yes.
Eventually.
Yes, and that's why
Eventually.
these grants are great, because it's kind of like initial startup.
Right.
It's not meant to kind of sustain it, so if we can
Correct.
just get the money to start it up eventually, hopefully it can be at least self-sustaining.
Correct.
They use the seed money.
Correct.
Keep going, but then you're gonna have to sustain it.
Sustain it.
Right.
And we anticipated that as being some portion of being supported by the budget in some portion. Even though it is going to sell to the public, it's not expected to be necessarily self-sufficient or make money, but more offset supplies, more like offset curriculum type
Keep in mind,
expenses.
the savings by having those kids getting educated in Rocky Hill, we are required to educate them.
Absolutely.
If we ever had to close that program down, each one of those kids is $150, up to potentially $250,000 per child for tuition and services. So you start to do the math on that, you realize that hiring a culinary director, providing some budgetary support for supplies is a small price to pay. That alone and the lease is the cost of maybe 1 or 2 students. Now,
Correct.
look at 8 or 10 getting outplaced, and you start to do the math, and you realize the board made a wise decision in supporting it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Both financially and socially, for the
That's even
students.
more important, as far as I'm concerned, that the kids are being educated in town with their peers.
Absolutely.
And keeping in mind that it's also being used for kids that don't necessarily fit
Have a
that
place to
profile,
go.
but as a creative option for a student that might need a space like that.
Absolutely. All right, looking through page 2, anybody else have a question on a specific line? I know I see some ups and downs on transportation out of district and in district, and those numbers are, as you've indicated multiple times, they change weekly or daily depending on
All the time.
students coming in, going out, changes in needs of students.
Yeah, as we talked about the other night, we're gonna see, at this point, fewer public school placements more private school outplacements, some trade-offs there. But to your point, Mr. Slattery, those accounts can fluctuate pretty extensively from time to time.
Ms. Manella?
I have a question for Chuck. When is our contract with transportation up again for renewal?
We have, we're in the third year now, so we'll have the fourth year coming up. So I would anticipate I'll be coming to the board in the fall,
Okay.
because, and we'll have to make a decision whether we're going to go to bid or, you negotiate to stay with New Britain Transportation, because depending on what comes out of those conversations, if we have to go out to bid, you typically like to get it out like November timeframe.
Yeah, that would be a good way to try to recoup some savings, if anything.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm nervous with the inflation that it's going to go the other way.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manella. Any other questions with regard to the object budget, object summary? Anything that needs to be looked into a little bit deeper?
Just a quick comment, and just to highlight, I know we addressed this the other day, and I understand it. I've actually had a couple people reach out and say, like, whoa, with the tuition for outplacements, and then we talked about that at pretty good length. But I just wanted to kind of highlight to whoever's watching and listening that, again, I know, Amy, you've drilled it into us, I think, pretty good, that we have a pretty extensive in-district programming that keeps that number of outplacement students right now to 10 this year, looking at estimated 13 for next year, and that's still way low compared to historically, and really good for a town the size of Rocky Hill, and we, for the most part, keep students in district. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that, because I did have a couple people actually reach out to me like, holy smokes, that's really high. I'm like,
I would encourage people to look at other districts and see what their expenditures are, because I can tell you, the district where Jesse came from, they had 60 students outplaced.
yeah.
Well, we get that comparison too of
Yeah,
how we,
of how we
statewide
spend
as well as
money.
in the
That-
dirt.
You do have
Right.
that. You have
That
And
number
it's-
right there.
So, yeah, and we have another number that, and it didn't come out in our conversations, was the percentage of our budget that is our total budget, total Board of Education budget, and this is going back a year or two, I think, the data, and the percentage of that Board of Education, but that's spent on special
Oh,
education.
that's in
Yeah,
there.
that's in the slides.
I was in the slides that you guys presented. Okay, I couldn't remember. I saw it somewhere.
It's in
And
the
that-
book, too.
Yeah, it was in the book, and that was like 20% roughly. And we were way down the list. Out of 180 districts in the state, we're like the 20th cheapest, or something in that ballpark, 20 or 30th cheapest. I mean, so it was a very good, to use Mark's language, bang for our buck, per pupil total. But this is specific to special education. I think our numbers are really pretty solid. So I just wanted to get that out there again, because I had people actually say something, and I was like, okay, are you listening? I want to make sure that they hear and that they have the information.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
typical that like the average person would not, like
I
that would
get
be
it.
surprising. Like,
It
wow,
is.
people don't know that a lot.
Exactly.
Sometimes the teachers don't even know. And if we say like, well, this
29.
is what a
Right.
outplacement costs, they're like,
Right.
it
Holy
does?
smokes. Right.
So
right.
I understand
the
that.
conversation is often, for that kind of money, what could we do?
Right.
Sort of thing. And I get that. Right. I live in this world too a lot, as you guys all know. So, but it's not as simple as taking some of that money and saying, let's spend it here and do this for cheaper. In addition to the fact that the legal requirements and all that stuff, and it's a PPT decision
That's
and all
what
that.
we've been doing by
yeah.
the Dream Academy, expanding the Dream Academy, asking for the assistant principals. Like that's what we're saying. Like if we can support our students in those ways, then we would be able to keep more students in district.
Thank you, Steve, for that time.
Thank you, Mr. Gausker. I think that's a good point. And I think we can't state it enough, or it can't be stated enough. Any other questions? Everybody good? Mrs. Fredo? Good?
I am good.
All right. moving
Recommend
along.
you go to program summary next. So again,
Correct.
You've got your $54 million proposal, but we lay these out differently. They're by program. So Chuck can talk you through these sheets as well, but I like looking at these well because they break it down by program. You could see what the music program costs, what the PE program costs. Gives you a different way of looking at the information.
Thank you, Dr. Zito.
So Chuck, you want to take us
Chuck?
through program summary?
Yeah, I think you did a good job of summarizing it. It's the same information, just in a different format. So it just gives you a different perspective on it, I guess you could say. You know, one that stands out when you look at it is school administration. And you see a jump there. Well, we talked about
That's right.
moving one of the special ed positions into the administration in the school. We also have the vice principals built in, so, that's why you see that school administration line jumping up. So a lot of the conversations we've had, now you could see them in a different viewpoint, I guess you could say. Mathematics is dropping. That's because the administration program that we had in math is now moving to school administration.
Yeah, I think that the two that stood out in mind were school administration and special education, which obviously have been the subject of much of our discussions up until throughout this entire process.
Right.
So we won't belabor that. I also saw that health services went up, is proposed to go up 21%. Is that tied to anything specific?
That we had, again, based on child's needs, we did have some additional nurse salaries.
We had to add a nurse for the beginning of this year,
Right.
Okay.
right? So that's, because if you look at the, like, actual and then adopted, you see the difference.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that was an additional.
Again, that's one of those situations that a medical problem develops with a particular child, and, I'm not going to single anything out, but sometimes we need to increase nursing services based on the needs of the students.
Makes sense.
Sometimes we're being billed for nursing services at outplacements. In some cases, nurses need to ride the bus with certain children. So there's all kinds of expenses, but that's another one of those accounts where you can see some.
Depending on needs.
Kids can graduate, the following year you might see a reduction, which is not uncommon. So it tends to be, tends to fluctuate. Armor and walks down to my and I need another
Yep.
paraprofessional, or I have to look at increasing health services, and those are the conversations we have. But at the end of the day, it's about making the decisions that are best for the kids, and that also comply with legal mandates.
Understood.
The information technology, that jumped up quite a bit again. That's the additional equipment that we have in the budget this year due to the,
Correct.
start to see a lot of the same.
It's the same things that keep popping up.
Different areas, yeah.
Because it's still the same 54 million that we're seeing, just broken down into different ways of looking at it.
Yep.
Which each is beneficial in its own way, but
Right.
it shows the. Anybody have any questions that stand out with respect to the program summary? Seeing none, we can move along.
I think staffing is the one you know want to get into for those workshops, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
I did provide them with revised.
Yeah.
and
I gave you a revised summary page for your staffing. And the only reason for that is, after discussion, just wanted to make it a little bit clearer. I think I had the additional, the addition of the culinary director. I had it at least, because it's a different type of position. I had it under teacher assistants, and I just moved it down to pupil personnel services. And then we had the one position for anticipated retirement. We didn't assign it to a specific school at this point in time. So we just, but we are adding the ML teacher. So in the original summary page, it offset, so it didn't show an increase, but we just wanted to show the increase of one, the ML teacher under 37, student support. And we just made those modifications.
So at the end of the day, we're anticipating at this point going down, we're gonna have staff. The budget's going up, but we're going down.
Or 1.5?
1.5.
1.5.
1.5.
No, just because we don't reflect the anticipated retirement.
Gotcha.
We reflect in the budget numbers, but not on the sheet. We haven't assigned it to a school yet or to a program.
Understood.
And behind the district-wide personnel summary, you'll just see, give a little bit of a description as to what goes in each category. Then the district-wide, we break out per location.
Yeah.
Any questions on the staffing?
Sometimes you see, just so you understand, we have, these are in what we call FTE, full-time equivalent positions. So you'll have part-time people, and that's why you see some weird numbers, 5.8 or 23.34.
Any questions with regard to staffing? Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Dr. Zito. Next,
Yeah, CIP would be the last portion. Everything covered.
so let's move along to CIP.
I'm sorry, Steve, because that went quick through staffing. I was still kind of looking at my sheets,
Sure,
if that's okay.
sure. Yeah.
And again, I know you guys have gone through this. I just want to make sure I understand it in my head. So the teaching positions at the elementary schools, the down 4 is
One West Hill, one Stevens, two Moses.
2 Mosier, right? And that was, and you went through that the other day with the,
Went through with the projected
right, the
enrollment.
projected enrollments and class sizes for all the grades and within the board, whatever, guidelines or whatever it is, right. So all that stuff. Okay, cool. Again, just trying to get it straight in my head, so I apologize just for the pause on it, you know. Because of course, as you can imagine, people will go, wait, we're dropping teachers, right? Like, the teachers are down, and the enrollment is part of the reason for that too. Right, so that's part of the reason in the enrollment, and as the enrollment shifts by grade sometimes, then that,
Keep in mind, there are some efficiencies gained once they leave elementary school,
right.
because the elementary school model is individual classroom teachers, homeroom teachers, if you will.
So it's a big clash year kind of moves through the system.
Think of your third grade teacher with your 20 kids. So if a couple of kids move into a grade level and we go above guidelines, there's a conversation about an additional third grade teacher.
Right.
When 15 additional kids show up at the high school and they're distributed amongst 65 teachers, they each have 7 or 8 classes.
You don't notice it.
Absorb that fairly easily. The same thing happens to a slightly lesser extent, but the pod structure for middle school, it's easier to absorb students. Even if a bunch of 6th graders move in, we can typically absorb them all. If 9 kindergarten kids show up at the or at Stevens School,
Could bump us up a
when
teacher.
he's calling me and going, that ninth kindergarten kid put up extra this year, we gotta do something, let's figure it out. And that's where those differences lie, so.
Right.
It's, but conversely, when the enrollment falls, we can look for efficiencies as well. It's harder if the high school enrollment falls a little bit, it's just
Yeah.
eliminating teachers, so it goes in both directions.
Yeah, and having been a high school teacher in the past, I had much higher classroom sizes because I was a high school classroom teacher than some of these numbers, and that's fine. I understand that process. And generally speaking, older grade kids, larger classroom size, smaller, lower grade kids, lower classroom size. Do those? And some of this is again just from my knowledge. Do some of those guidelines? The board sets those. Do we get those from state guidelines that set those, or where do those come from?
Pretty locally developed, I mean, we've looked at them over the years. The board slightly increased the cap at the upper grade levels, the elementary wise, fourth and fifth.
Okay.
But if you look at the projections for next year, we're still projecting 20 to 21 kids per class at that level. I think, I'm personally comfortable with the guidelines where they are right now. The problem, if you drop them, and you try to adhere to them, you're gonna require more teachers.
Of course.
I would recommend raising them. 25-year-olds.
I don't want any part of it. I'll say that much. I taught high school.
At kindergarten level, we do provide additional paraprofessional support. But overall, I think the guidelines are appropriate.
Can I jump in there for a second?
course, Ms.
Sorry,
Alfredo.
excuse my voice tonight. I actually wanted to circle back to that conversation about the projected enrollment, because I know you had said 149 student decrease over the next 3 years, which I think is extremely promising in class size, but we don't know where those kids are gonna be from, or again, that crystal ball that we don't have about kids coming in and out of district. And so I think that it's important that we acknowledge the class sizes. And I bring this up because I do think that the dysregulation of students that we've kind of been hearing about either through committee or again through the budget process really can be connected with the class sizes. And I think that's why the request of the assistant principals is being made. I think that there is data out there that, is showing that students are struggling with their well-being, mentally, physically, and emotionally after COVID. I do think that students, really do need that toolbox of regulation skills in order to be ready for and also be available for learning. So there is a proposal, actually there was a proposal I believe made last year in the Connecticut legislation. I don't think it passed, but that same proposal is going back in again this year that actually does request that Board of Eds look at capping the class sizes. And the reason being, and I'll just read a quote from Kate Diaz, class sizes can significantly impact the school environment, including the conditions that can affect students' mental health and emotional stress. The manifestations of emotional stress show up in very different ways, some obvious, some silent. Large class sizes make it harder for teachers to connect with students and provide one-on-one attention. This lack of connection also makes it difficult for teachers to monitor emotional stress and potential escalation of negative and potentially violent behaviors. And while I don't think that our class sizes right now in Rocky Hill are in danger of the guidelines set by the board, even with the 4 reductions being proposed, I just think that given the fact that we've been hearing about the dysregulation going on, I think that it would be a good idea for the board to take a deep dive into looking into the class sizes. If that proposed legislation passes, I think it would be a good idea for us to take a look at those guidelines. They are significantly different than what we have. So, something to think about.
I just want to say one thing only because I get all like I do all the hiring and like the applicants and the people that come to work in Rocky Hill, and also very involved in the magnet schools and everything. If that legislation passes, I will be shocked because I don't know what these other districts are going to do, because people come here because our class sizes are low, and like, I know we just hired a couple people, and like, their class sizes, they came here, they're a lot bigger. I had a letter of recommendation from a neighboring town, it was a kindergarten class, and they had 26 kids in the class. And there was no para educator. And I know the magnet schools, like the preschools, there's like 20, 25 kids in those classes. So I'll be really interested to see if that passes, because I think that's, you know, we'll be okay. But some of these other districts have class sizes that are like a lot bigger than ours. So that's going to be, I didn't know that, so
Yeah.
that's going to be really interesting.
And our numbers are not far off, but they are a change. I mean, we have right now grades 2 and 3, 22 in a class. They don't want more than 23 kids, grades 3 through 8 in a class.
Wow.
And 25, 9 through 12. So I don't know what our guidelines are past 5th grade, but,
That's our cap in the
okay,
25, so.
okay.
Yeah.
Is that,
Classes of restrictions based on seating, like the technology and.
Right, because you can just fit so many kids in there, right.
Like classes CTE, but the general rule of thumb for the high school is 25.
Okay.
Again, just to be clear, we monitor these numbers very closely. And I have in the past had to make adjustments. I've had to hire teachers, we hired a special ed teacher in the midst of this year. In the past, I've transferred people, you know, if you look at Stevens School, 4 sections projected 80 kids, that's the enrollment right now in kindergarten is 80. If that number climbs up, I'm gonna be looking at other ways to support that and get enough teacher in that building. So, you hire me to have that oversight, and I do what I need to do to make sure that the class sizes remain in fidelity with the board's guidelines. So you gotta have a little, faith that we do handle that, and we watch it very closely.
Absolutely, and I know I've written to you about it before, so, as you know, I watch those numbers too.
We're on the numbers, Don Kennison is very good.
Yep.
The principals all know how many sections they have, how many kids in each class. I mean, this is something we take very seriously, and we do make adjustments when we need to.
I think it's also important to note that that legislation didn't pass. We don't know why it didn't pass, so it could be
No,
that.
but it is being proposed again this year, so it very well could be. It's being pushed to
It
pass.
could be,
so.
but I don't think that we need to concern ourselves with what might be. I think we wait until it passes, and then we see what actually passes, and then we address
What were they recommending?
where we're at.
yeah, our numbers aren't far off anyway.
They're not far, no.
Our actual,
Yeah, right now, well, yes, they are, except for pre-K 2, they want no more than 20. So
We're-
we have
we're
22, we're 2 over.
super close.
The one thing that would just concern me in the future is the 3 apartment buildings going up, and I know a lot of them are
Yeah, we have-
supposedly young business professionals, so maybe not be families, but Stephanie Place, I think, is going to be oriented towards families, and that would be Stevens, and then Ames Apartments would be Stevens, so, and they're all going up around the same time, so we're getting 3 apartment complexes all around the same time.
So I think the NESDEC report, they know that, and
Right.
they know all of that, yeah.
The NESDEC thing, right?
Yep.
You have that in there, their methodology, I
Yep.
believe, is explained in the report. But they track all those factors.
Right.
They
And-
will actually develop a metric if a new housing complex goes in, and they'll tell you, obviously.
How many kids that adds?
Children into fractions, but you get the report, for example, when this goes in, you can expect 0.3 children per unit.
Right,
Right.
right. Do the math.
Yeah, it's not.
Close to that.
And the NESDEC does a pretty good job. I mean, they say we're solid for 3 years or something, the way they do their projections. They're like,
They say we're gonna drop.
they're pretty accurate, yeah.
I have a
Thanks, Steve.
question.
Ms. Manila?
So I have a question. So, Mark, I know this 8th grade class that is moving on to the high school, that was one of the largest classes.
The biggest.
That is moving up. I think we have kids in that class. So Jay's gonna be reproved because that big class is moving on to the high school. So like, to your point, it's just because the high school so many more teachers, it's just gonna be absorbed in the class.
Dispersed.
We'll absorb it pretty well. I mean, the interesting thing, if you look at the high school enrollment report you get every year, is a lot of the electives, in some cases, tend to have lower class sizes than some of the required classes, which makes sense. There's certain courses not every kid has to take, every kid has to take English. it's leveling too, if you keep in mind honors academic in general, and you're gonna see smaller class sizes at the general level. But to answer your question, I don't anticipate a problem absorbing that increase for the way the high school staff.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? And Mr. Maziar's, my daughter is wondering if you're going to the high school since
Yeah, we all
she's,
wanted-
she said,
Yeah, we all said the
both
same
mine and
thing.
Miss Manella's, you've been their administrator their entire Rocky Hill career. It's just because of the way it worked
It-
out.
it's
You were
time
at
to flip.
Stevens, then you
Yeah.
opened Mosier, then you went to GM.
Actually think that's what principals do.
They probably, that's their only experience. All right. And- Yeah, I don't think any, I think we're on to CIP, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this should not be new. Most of you, many of you have had this.
Yes.
But Chuck has laid out, focus here with, about $1.5 million proposed for next year. The HVAC work at Stevens is, about half that number. The science classrooms, we have 2 classrooms left, so at the most, we'll be done with the upgrades at all grade levels there. And then you can see the rest of it laid out. I mean, we went over this in detail with the facilities committee, and they kind of approved this plan to go forward for the CIP. I do want to note that the CIP is a separate appropriation from the town. It's not part of the operating budget. From a technical standpoint, the town retains control over that money throughout the year. And they, it's a pro forma thing, but we have to go to them to get approval for the release of funds. But I think it's a good plan, the way it's laid out.
Yeah.
Happy to answer any questions. It's easy to read. Chuck does a very good job. He works very closely with Ron on this. And I know, Mr. Gavin's not here tonight, but he also was very involved at the facility, with the facilities committee in terms of developing that. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
I have just one.
Ms. Tucker?
And I did miss that facilities meeting, so I apologize if it was covered there. The replace pumps for the high school pool. I remember when this came up initially, I thought Parks and Rec helped supplement any part of the pool budget. Is that,
I know they were gonna replace the grout, or
Is that-
they had a
okay.
problem with the grout, so they were gonna redo the grout. So we
Correct.
anticipated, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, replacing the pump at the time they did that.
Yeah, so there's only one pool drain down.
oh, that's what it was, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank
So
you.
when they drain it down to do that work, we're gonna replace the pumps when the water's out, I think, right?
Perfect, thank you for that clarification.
Anyone have any other questions on the CIP as proposed?
Just one, just clarification.
Clemens?
It's the man trap for GMS. That's to extend for visitors coming in, they should only get so far in the building.
Correct. So you see that man trap right now at Mosier, you see it at the high school.
Yeah.
You see it when you get to Stevens School, it's pretty much throughout the district, but the issue at GMS is when you walk in, you get into the front doors, you have access. And I think West Hill still needs some work too, correct, Ron?
That's the best we can do without major renovation, unfortunately.
West Hill, there's still a barrier to get into the main corridor. But the issue we want to do with GMS is install the man trap. We've got a perfect example at the high school of the way it should be designed. You get into the building, and then you have to get through a second door before you're into the main office or into the corridor.
Because currently at GMS, you have to stay outside with the camera and hit the button to be buzzed in. Now it would be,
But the high school has that
Yeah.
extra layer.
yep.
I mean, really isn't
Right.
a person trap, a man trap. You're in that enclosed.
You're
area.
trapped.
I mean, I know what they are. I just wanted to, clarify that it was gonna be GMS with the security, so
Yeah.
that's, okay. Perfect.
That's right, because currently GMS has 2 sets of doors, but the inside ones aren't locked,
When you
right?
get in through the front door at GMS, you're into the
You're
building.
into
You
the,
have full access.
The
Yeah.
other schools, even West Hill, you have to go
Yeah.
to the second door to get into the main
Correct.
building.
Yep.
And just to be clear, that's in because we're reading it, but everyone listening is not hearing it. That's in for this proposed 24-25, the
CIP.
GMS man trap. I just wanted to get that out there verbally, so people, because I had questions
Yeah.
about that exact thing. They're like, "Hey, what's up with the man trap for GMS?" I'm like, "Well, just so happens."
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I don't know, people, most people aren't gonna know what that means.
Right, no,
You know, the term
it's
man
great.
trap.
I think the conversation's perfect.
It's,
Yeah.
it's the, you know, you can get into the school, you can get to the main office, you're not gonna be able to get to the general students without being buzzed in again.
High school, you can't even get it to the main office without being buzzed in.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a two-step.
Everyone's probably went through them, but just doesn't know what it's called.
And similar stuff at Boca
Right.
too.
Yep.
You get in,
Yeah.
the main entrance, you need to be buzzed either into the main corridor or into the main
Or
office.
into the office.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a question. There's one thing I didn't notice on here, it's being spread out. How are the Stevens School trailers holding up? Because I know we've had some issues recently with them, and I'm hearing some parents
Ron
complaining
gives
about
the
them,
award
so.
of the year. Dead skunk in there. That was, contributing to the, he actually gave Chuck a Christmas card, I hope your Christmas doesn't stink. They went in over that weekend, this was back in the fall, there was a skunk actually passed away and under the ramp, dead. So once we moved that, we've done a more aggressive maintenance program to keep the area, you know, there's a stream back there.
Skunk-free.
It's a natural,
Right.
it's kind of like a paradise for, you've got a stream, you've got woodlands.
Park.
And you've got the attraction to those portables, but they've, Ron, you could speak to it, you've started a more aggressive pest maintenance program over there. To try to really discourage any of the vermin from going underneath. And, you know, hibernating for the winter, for example, and doing what they do and producing smaller skunks. So we're trying to-
We hardened the barriers around the skirting, so that there's less chance of anything. We were digging through some soiled areas and just burrowing through. That's all been hardened with wire mesh. And we are maintaining, we have a weekly inspection of the portables. Now, 'cause what happens is it's on the playground and the kids kick balls against them, skirting breaks, so we're on top of that more often so that we don't have that opportunity for the critters to.
And besides rodents, how are they holding up, the portables?
They're fine. We did a couple of years ago with upgraded carpeting, painting, top units. The roof was replaced as part of the roof replacement of Stevens, so there's, you know, they're watertight. And it's just general upkeep. I mean, for trailers, they're doing really well. But we stay on top of them, you know, everything is up to date as far as, remember, keep in mind, two of those were installed just prior to the being built, so they're not that old.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
I think it's important to note too, like a renovation to make a more permanent area there would be far beyond the budget constraints,
yeah.
but the budget of the Board of Ed. That would probably require a referendum, something of that nature.
Probably, definitely.
That's why you asked.
Ms. Minell?
Ron, were the port, I thought West Hill, didn't we move those portals over to Stevens or no? I thought,
We moved, four from there, they were just taken back by the
okay,
leasing company.
right.
Rentals.
There's three original portables, say original, that are over, that's Stevens, and there's three more there's two that are very new, one that's
Okay.
and they're all over this point. Everything that the town is for us is offsite.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions with the CIP?
No, again, I've looked at this a bunch, a fair amount the last, few months. That bubble in 25, 26, of course, with the roof at West Hill, I know it's coming. I mean, like, it's coming one way or the other. And obviously, it's hard to avoid a big bubble in that year for CIP. So I just hope the people that approve this CIP are, understand that. That's all, because it's got to be done. And I know you guys have talked to us about that extensively, and I, understand it myself. And it just looks like a big bubble when you look there and go, whoa. It's sticker shock a little bit, but it's got to happen. It's got to happen. It's got to happen.
I've worked with school districts, I've told the story where Scott Nozick's worked there too, on rainy days with buckets, it's not a good option. Buckets in hallways and classrooms on a rainy day. And we want to avoid that, and when a school is 26 years old, it's time to keep that, there's a value in a town maintaining its assets.
Now, when they approve our CIP, because I don't know how this works, they approve year by year. So this is our long-term plan, but they will, right now, they will approve this next
1 year.
proposed 1 year. So they'll approve that or whatever, and they'll set a number to that separately from the budget number, right? So they'll come back to us with a budget number, come back to us with a CIP number. Okay. I just want to understand
Do
that.
they get a copy of this, though?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so they can see the projections. Yep.
And I just to, I know since I've been on the board, it seems like every year it's been around 1 million CIP. So last year we got 200,000, just to let you know how much of a hit that was. But it's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually we've been asking for, since I've been here, around 1 million is what, and we've always been responsible with spreading it out over the years, so there's no surprises, like, hey, surprise, so.
Correct. And Mr. Kosker, your point was well taken. It made me think, my comment regarding the portables was really more for there was chatter in the public about why don't we have it wasn't really responsive to Ms. Morphea's question, but it just jogged my memory. I had been approached as far as why don't we have a permanent solution, and I just want, really my statement was more not toward Ms. Morphea, but more
been
toward,
approached
just so that the public understands that that's something that's
Especially
far
if it's
bigger
stuck. I
than.
think we've all been approached.
Yeah, I think, exactly. I think we've all been approached in that respect. So I just want to be clear, I wasn't necessarily, I know you weren't suggesting that we put a permanent response there, or a permanent, but it was more for anybody who's watching.
And those are questions we get, right? As
Of
board
course.
members, we get those questions. People approach on those things and have the conversation and make sure we're on the same page about it. And, because you look at this and it's this many millions and such, and it's questionable, like they question it anyway, you know what I mean? And there's good solid data and reason behind it, so.
Absolutely.
That's awesome, thanks.
Last
Yes, Ms.
I
Manel.
would love to see something like this for our technology.
Oh,
He has that.
at the technology committee meeting, Mr. Gay put together essentially a CIP for technology.
I can send that out.
Yeah.
If you have a copy, get it out.
Chris.
This week.
For that very
With the
reason, essentially to
timeline,
try
yeah.
and have an
To track
idea.
it.
And just like the CIP is, the capital improvements is kind of we put placeholders out there to gauge. It's always kind of a little bit fungible until the year that we're actually asking.
Thank you.
So, yeah, good call.
I remember. Oh, that's good. Perfect.
Any other questions with the CIP? All right, seeing none, I think that may have been. Is there anything else we need to go through?
Covered everything pretty thoroughly. But you do have an opportunity, if you want to have a meeting next week, to have a conversation. Historically, haven't had your third meeting, it was back in June. Two nights. Your appropriation date is March 14th. You may want to think about, board members have ideas of where they'd like to make adjustments in the budget. We have had scheduled special meetings in the past, maybe a week or two prior to the March 14th adoption date. That's been done in the past. Where you could have a conversation about adjustments you'd like to see before you adopt. Because this is my recommendation, but the next step is you adopt your budget as the elected organization. And you have the full authority to adjust anything in this plan. It's your role to adjust it as you see fit. And then, if you, it's based on the town charter, you must adopt a budget by March 14th. We then transmit that to the council. Typically, in May, they will make their final appropriation after we present what goes from my recommendation to your budget. I then present the board's budget to the council in early May. Those of you that have been on the board for years know how the process some of you are new.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You may want to think, Mr. Slattery, about scheduling a special meeting or using next week to make those adjustments. It's really up to you. In the past, sometimes board members have said, give us a little more time to digest it and maybe come back and.
I'm thinking next week.
I think that's what we did. I think last
Or
week we
next-
had a special meeting in later February where we made some additional adjustments that the board had asked us to make. Right now, we have one adjustment, and that came from this funder. On the technology piece with the iPads, that was.
Oh, yeah, getting moved on. Right, right.
That whole $3,000.
Well, again, it's, I mean, I would, if you came in with a $2 million adjustment, the adjustments typically are tweaks to the
Right.
budget.
So you're not looking to be surprised? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Mark. I'm kidding. No,
I think it's a responsible budget. I think
Yeah.
it covers the needs.
Yeah.
I think we've tried to make, really hard to make some
Benefit.
staffing offsets in terms of keeping the salary line item down while still supporting the elementary schools. That's the big switch this year is to try to get those assistant principals.
I got you. I know, I
The
remember.
elementary schools,
Yep.
dealing with the need in the ELML program. But again, at the end of the day, it's 2.5 fewer staff. So
Correct.
we're doing what we can to try to keep things reasonable.
There has been some, I think everyone, both from the special education committee meeting and from going through the budget, I think everyone understands kind of the challenges that special education is presenting as far as the need for the administrators in the lower schools. I also think that I'm torn, and I think some of the board members are torn about the math position, because we've been doing so well in math, and we've so I think one thing just that I would throw out there for today is possibly trying to figure out a way to keep that math position and have the administrators, and maybe keep us at around that 5.8. I think I'd like to at least see what that proposal, or some sort of creative solution, even if it's not an administrator, something that gives us some reassurance that a lot of those tasks are going to be, again, I'm just spitballing here. I haven't really talked to anyone specifically about it, but I think I'd like to challenge you to do it, to see if we can accomplish that.
I have a question. I know last year we were kind of hearing rumors of where they were going to approve us before we even presented the budget. Do we know when we will normally kind of hear that number? I kind of wish we knew before, ahead of the fact. I would like to know what would possibly we would have to cut, and that way we can tell the board, like, this is, like, last year was almost a kindergarten teacher. It was almost the school sports, middle school sports. Like, if they hear that, maybe that would help them be a little nicer to
Well, I
us,
think that
guess.
this process, I mean, it's our obligation to put together a budget that we see fit for the district based on the needs and the information that we're digesting. I think that's what we're here to do, and I think we have to do that, and then act in ways that we feel are appropriate and that we can stand behind, and then we've done our part, and then it goes from there.
I just think, I guess I'm not explaining myself, but, like, I guess if you're saying to them, we're gonna have drastic cuts that are gonna impact us,
Who's them? I'm sorry.
to town council, it's one thing, but then it's another thing when you say, looking at the numbers you're proposing, we might lose teachers, you know what I mean? Like, we might lose middle school sports. That, it's a different conversation, I think, with them. It hits them a little harder than it's gonna impact us. You know what I mean? Where that way they'd understand, if you cut this, this is what you're doing to our school system. This is what will drastically hurt our class, That's just a thought out there, that's all.
I think that what we do have the benefit of is that all of these workshops are on YouTube.
Right, but they don't all have the binder. I mean, does everybody in the town council have?
They'll get a copy of the binder. They'll-
But they don't have it right now, going through watching these,
They will.
right?
No, because it's.
No.
So if they're watching it and we're going through line by line, like, it's not,
What the-
I don't see somebody being able to follow along as well if you don't have this in front
Well,
of you.
I think
So-
what the town council does with the budget, once we put it together and approve it, is what the town council does with it. I think our concern has to be with addressing the needs of the district, and then standing behind the budget that we put forth.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Manoa?
Mark, I have a quick question about the math the coordinator. Does that, I know right now it's an administrator position,
It is, it's in the administrative union, it's in the contract.
so it would be difficult to try to fill that position and have another VP because
You'd
of,
be adding two
Yeah.
administrators,
right?
so we're at 16 right now, we're recommending 17.
It's not like you're sliding a teacher in that role because of the special certifications they have, right? They would need,
Requires an 092 because it
exactly.
evaluates teachers.
Yep.
Now, I will embrace the challenge, Mr. Slattery, will, and I will come back with a proposal for 18 administrators. And I will also attempt to do that at a 5.8 budget, so we'll sharpen our pencils a little bit more and see what we can do.
Yeah.
But again, just keep in mind, anytime we're making those kinds of adjustments, 85% of the budget is personnel. So when people look to, really try to save money on budgeting, for example, you gotta look at people. Copy your account only takes you so far. But I'll embrace that challenge and we'll get back to you and we'll see what we can do and what a budget with two administrators, because there'd be two elementary assistant principals at that point that would be new to the budget if we retain them in that position. I'm happy to do it.
And I know everybody, I mean, the 5.8 is already high, but I think it's something that we should be able to just consider.
I'll do the best I can to stay around at 5.8 and see what we can do to make some additional adjustments.
And if we didn't pre-spend, what was where would we have been at?
4.8.
4.8.
4.8.
And that's a good point to reiterate, Ms. Murphy. We'll
What
be-
I would recommend is, give me more than a week to work on this.
Certainly.
I don't think you need to meet next week.
No, I think we're good.
An early March workshop would be helpful. If we do it, a couple weeks out from March 14th, or late February even.
I think that's a good idea.
Do a follow-up, we could do another one.
That sounds good.
Know where you stand going into March 14th.
I think that sounds good.
And by then, we should know something about insurance as well.
We'll have a better handle on insurance.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. And that might help or hurt what we're trying to do. See.
Careful what you wish for.
Chuck said this the other night, we will look to bid, we will look for competitive bids from other vendors. We will also consider moving to the state 2.0 plan, I think it's called, the state health insurance plan,
Yep.
which municipalities are eligible to join. We'll have to run through all the disruption rates and all that stuff, but your overall point is excellent, that we may have a better handle.
But isn't state plan a little cheaper?
Depends.
Or
They
at least
haven't
right
come out
now.
with New rates yet. We don't have our final rates yet, so we'll have to look at that.
Chuck,
That's another reason not to meet next week, wait until late February.
Correct.
Probably early March.
I think that makes sense, late February, early March, if that makes sense to everybody.
okay.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
No.
I just want to thank all of you, you had excellent questions. All of you, many of you emailed me, very involved in the budget process. It was impressive from this side to see how seriously you take the process and dig into it. And I remember you last weekend, spent all weekend doing the homework and getting with a lot of questions, so thank you very much.
Yeah, and to that point, thank you to the board members as well, because that helps to move us along the way we were able to do today, rather than saying, okay, we'll get back to you on that, okay, we'll get back to you on that. Having those questions in advance, and having a printout that we could run through with the answers at the start of day one is the reason why it's before 9 o'clock and we're just about done.
And if you run into something, if you're looking through the book again over the next 2 weeks, don't hesitate again to send another email for additional updates. We're happy to provide you with that.
And you might be saying this in a second, but just thank you guys, and thanks for the rest of the team out back that's been here for two. And I don't know how much longer I have to talk for Scott Nozick to win the bet this time. But you already lost. All right, sorry. I'm sorry. But no, seriously, I think we all appreciate seeing the rest of the team back there and having you here supporting the whole crew. So
Dr. Diaz, on
Absolutely.
your birthday, coming here, we appreciate it. Happy birthday again.
Is it today Dr. Diaz's birthday?
It's her birthday, yeah.
Right, spending it at a budget
Should we
meeting.
sing happy birthday to her? I don't know if everybody wants to hear me sing.
if we turn off the mics,
I
man.
know. No, we won't. But happy birthday, Annabelle. Dr. Diaz, sorry. To Tom's point, thank you to our administrators for crunching the numbers, for putting together the visuals, which I think make it much easier to digest. Additionally, for coming back after you already went through your stuff and kind of rehashing it again at my request. I appreciate that. And thank you to all this administrators in the back, because when we have those more specific questions, it's always great to be able to just say, oh, Mr. Mays, can you chime in on that? Or Ron, can you chime in on that? It just makes it a whole much more efficient process. So thank you, everyone, for all of your, and thank you, Christine, for just everything. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved by Ms. Morphia.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schaber. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 8-0 at 8:50.